Good morning to all. Please grab your last coffees and have a seat. This is the largest registration we've ever had for the Open Doors press conference. We're really glad you're here. This is, for us, the start of International Education Week, and we'll begin with the video from the Secretary of Education. Can we have the video, please?
Hello, I'm Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. I'm pleased to join the State Department in marking International Education Week. This week is an opportunity to highlight the benefits of international education and discuss ways to improve education for all students on their lifelong learning journeys as they prepare for today's and tomorrow's careers. Today's global economy needs students who are prepared with an eye toward tomorrow's opportunities. We can't presuppose what tomorrow's economy will look like. So students must anticipate and adapt, acquire and master broadly transferable and versatile educational competencies like critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity, and cultural intelligence. All students can benefit from gaining global and cultural competencies, no matter where their educations, careers, and lives take them. Education and the economy are inseparable, especially given the interconnectedness of the world today. A dynamic and changing economy requires dynamic and changing approaches to education. That's why everyone must question everything to ensure nothing limits a student from being prepared for what comes next. International Education Week is an opportunity to rethink and explore, engage with someone from a different background, taste a new cultural dish, study a different language, take a risk and open doors to a world of possibilities.
Well, I want to thank the Secretary of Education very much for both those sentiments and the work she is doing with all of us to provide the competencies and emphasize the competencies that are important in the world we share. It's interesting for a minute just to reflect on the history of Open Doors. We started collecting data on international students in America in 1920. And we did it to, at the time, help the Commissioner of Immigration enable the Immigration Service to allow foreign students and scholars to enter the United States at a time that we did not have a non-immigrant student visa. And part of the arrangement was to have this annual census of who was coming from where and what were they studying. And almost from the very beginning, by 1921, we were also helping the U.S. Consular Corps read foreign transcripts, interpret foreign transcripts, and verify who was actually a student from accredited universities in their own countries. In 1972, we continued to do this, but the numbers became so large that we sought and received a grant from the Department of State, and we're very grateful for their support ever since to help undertake that research, this research. We know that State Department, and particularly Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs programs today are more important than ever before. Sometimes ECA is the first point of contact that international students have with America. And for many Americans that receive an ECA grant, it may be the first time that they have the opportunity to study abroad. So what ECA does is more important than ever in bringing the world to America and Americans to the world. And therefore, it is a privilege for all of us to have the new Assistant Secretary of State for Education and Cultural Affairs with us this morning. She will bring a message from the Secretary of State and a very strong message from the Bureau about the importance of the work that we all do. It's my privilege now to ask Marie Royce to join us at the podium.
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see so many longtime friends and make so many new ones this morning. And welcome to the launch of the 2018 Open Doors Report, the preeminent source of information on international student mobility. And thank you, Ellen, for that kind introduction. It's a pleasure to see, again, many of you here today from the government, media, and higher education community. Thank you for joining us. And again, I'd like to thank Dr. Ellen Goodman and the Institute for the International Education, IIE, for sponsoring the event and for your efforts on helping to launch this year's report. IIE collects, analyzes, and publishes the Open Doors data each year. In addition, at this time, I'd like to thank Deputy Assistant Secretary Edward Ramatowski from Consular Affairs for his support as well. Let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you, Edward. Thanks. And again, it's an honor to participate in this event and kick off the 19th Annual International Education Week. Throughout this week, the United States Department of State and the United States Department of Education, as well as schools, universities, and communities across the country and around the world, will promote the importance of international education together. And to add to the excitement of our activities planned for International Education Week, I'm pleased to share with everyone that our flagship educational exchange initiative, the Fulbright program, will be introducing a new logo in the coming months celebrating Fulbright's dynamic network and lasting connections. So look for that soon. Now at this time, our Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who's been a great supporter of our efforts for International Education Week, has created a video for us. So please turn your attention to the screen to see the special message from Secretary Mike Pompeo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. American diplomats go to work each day to represent the United States all around the world. American students studying abroad also play a key role as citizen ambassadors. They tell the American story and demonstrate American values and ideals to the entire world. Nothing can replace the people-to-people connections that happen when our young people study abroad. Let's work together to provide more such opportunities for Americans of all backgrounds. This is also the third consecutive year that over 1 million international students are studying in the United States. We're consistently the #1 destination for foreign students, and we are pleased that young people from all over the world want to experience for themselves the American way of life. I call on all American universities, businesses, civic groups, and NGOs to promote international education and spread the word about the world-class education that American campuses have to offer. International education should be part of every student's academic career. Education exchanges, whether it's Americans going overseas or foreigners coming to the U.S., are among the most important tools in our diplomatic arsenal. They maintain America's competitive edge and preserve our leadership in the world. The success of our foreign policy priorities depend on them. This International Education Week, let's encourage American and international students to study abroad.
I'd like to thank Secretary Pompeo for his kind remarks, and we'll get to hear the rest of it very soon. At the State Department, we recognize that international education is important for the United States economy and America's exposure to international issues and to diverse cultures. Our efforts to foster people-to-people exchanges is one of the most effective contributors towards solving global challenges, expanding economic opportunity, and increasing security and stability worldwide. And I'm pleased to share, and as you heard the Secretary say, that for the third year in a row, more than 1 million international students are studying in the United States. That's an increase of over 15,000 students from last year. I don't know if you're aware, but the United States has consistently attracted about 1/4 of the international students globally. That's pretty amazing. This number is a record high for inbound mobility and is a testament to the quality of our institutions. Students from around the world are drawn to the United States because of the excellence, the diversity, and academic freedom of our public and private higher education institutions. And the United States remains the top destination of choice for students from around the world. In addition, international students make an impact on our economy. Just last year, international students contributed over $42 billion to the United States economy and supported over 450,000 United States jobs. That's pretty incredible. And international students also bring diverse perspectives to American campuses through their presence in U.S. classrooms and communities. This is crucial as it exposes U.S. students, 90% of whom do not study abroad before graduating, to new viewpoints and cultures they will need to understand as they enter the global marketplace. This two-way relationship is beneficial to our national security. The Trump administration is charting a new course for U.S. foreign policy, which includes the promotion of America's national security interests through educational and cultural exchanges. Increased student mobility and academic engagement support the 4 pillars of the national security strategy, which are protect the American people, the homeland, and the American way of life, promote American prosperity, preserve peace through strength, and advance American influence. As part of the Department of State's strategy to achieve its mission, the ECA Bureau and I have developed the following goals for the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, relevant to exchange programming. Goal 1, advance American foreign policy objectives through flexible, responsive programs. Goal 2, increase Americans' global competitiveness. Goal 3, counter disinformation and radicalization. Goal 4, bolster democratic principles, strengthen the rule of law, encourage strong civil society institutions. Goal 5, achieve greater efficiency through program evaluation, virtual tools, and alumni relationships. U.S. colleges and universities are ideal for establishing ties between Americans and their international peers in ways that will help accomplish these 5 goals. And these students, they interact in classrooms, laboratories, cafeterias, and dormitories. They develop the knowledge and skills they need to become the next generation of leaders to address the shared global challenges of the 21st century. We know that international students also have more choices than ever before on where to pursue higher education. While United States institutions face increased competition abroad as to recruit the best and brightest minds to the campuses, the strength and the diversity of the U.S. higher education system, which prioritizes student success, remains our greatest asset. It's essential that U.S. institutions of higher learning continue to reach out to students and their families in a wide range of countries, set strategic goals for international recruitment strategies, and emphasize that America's academic doors are open and welcoming to all students from throughout the world. To support the efforts of increasing participation in the American higher education community, our Education USA network is operating in 180 countries with 435 centers and 550 advisors to guide international students. I call that a big commitment. Education USA works on behalf of more than 4,700 accredited U.S. higher institutions. Its basic services are free to students, as well as American colleges and universities. We're working together with our partners in the U.S. higher education community to increase international educational opportunities for both students overseas and for Americans. In academic year 2016, nearly 333,000 American students studied abroad for academic credit. That's an increase of 2.3% over the prior year. Study abroad provides American students with international experiences and cultural understandings that contribute to their marketability and employment prospects in the global job market. American students serve as cultural ambassadors for the United States, sharing their own values and their own viewpoints. American students abroad help counter potential misperceptions and build peaceful relations, one person at a time. While the number of Americans seeking study abroad opportunities continues to grow, we still have work to do to ensure that these opportunities are available to more diverse groups of Americans and that Americans study in a variety of world regions. We want more young people in this country to recognize that international education is an important component of their success, no matter what their future goals might be. Most importantly, we want the next generation of global leaders to live the American experience and be educated in American values of liberty, freedom, and democracy. The U.S. Department of State commitment is to continue our efforts to support increased international education. The number of international students in the United States has doubled over the last 16 years, proving that the United States is the consistent leader of choice for international education. It's our commitment to ensure that this remains the case. To do so, we're recruiting new partners, both education professionals and higher education institutions. These efforts on our behalf will ensure that our goal of increasing international student participation is reached in the long term. Now, we need people who can take on the toughest challenges and find solutions that keep our nation more secure and more prosperous. We want to send a message that international education should be a part of every student's academic career. So at this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage two international students to share their message. They're both studying at two great U.S. universities because of Education USA. Jocelyn Hidalgo Bolivia is pursuing her doctorate degree in psychology with a concentration in lifespan cognitive neuroscience at Georgetown University. And Giovanni Rocha of Brazil is pursuing his doctorate degree in political science at the University of Pennsylvania. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you. Both are very accomplished international students, but I will let them tell you about their amazing accomplishments. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Rocha Hidalgo. As a first-generation student, I completed my bachelor's degree at Berea College in Berea, Kentucky, with a double major in psychology and child and family studies. This college provided me and offered me a full tuition scholarship, something I wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise. I'm currently pursuing a second year of my doctorate degree in psychology and lifespan cognitive neuroscience. I look at how the relationship between bilingualism and cognition on infants and early childhood, looking at their behaviors and the neural basis. I'm originally from Santa Cruz, Bolivia. I'm a low-income social status. My dad is a carpenter, and my mom is a stay-at-home mom. They didn't have the opportunity to go to college, and I was able to complete that dream for them. Education USA has been an ongoing support for me since I was selected in the Opportunity Funds program 6 years ago when I was applying for an undergraduate degree. That amount of money without the program, again, I would not have been able to afford coming from the family, a low-income family. Education USA has not only provided me with the tools to succeed during the application process, such as providing me with books, a space to work, and access to a computer, and even the internet, but it also has provided me with a lot of information and advice at every single step in the application process, from taking the SAT, the TOEFLs, and even going over my personal statement. Education USA, most importantly, provided me with a community. I was able to meet multiple students going through the same process as I was, or about to start the same process of application. People that I still talk to after 6, 7 years, and I ask questions even. I met some of them have come to the US, and I'm still in touch with. I also met multiple representatives from different universities, and I was able to assist to many webinars offered by Education USA. After I graduated college, I was applying to graduate programs, and once again, Education USA advisors supported me through that process, even though they were all the way in Bolivia, and I was in the US. Their constant and patience, and their constant support and their patience was a great incentive for me to persist in my dream of studying psychology and the human brain, especially in the United States. One day, I will be able to come back to Bolivia and start my own research laboratory, which it's gonna look again at how infants learn and how their brain activity, how they perform in these cognitive tasks and how their brain activity goes. I also want to, in order to show my appreciation for Education USA, I participate in so many events that they offer to their students. For example, I speak to students all the way in Bolivia and their families via Skype or Zoom about my experiences studying in the US. It helps them to talk about it helps them to hear these stories from people that they were in the same shoes. It really does help to tell them about my experiences in firsthand and about the whole process. I remember how scared and nervous I was when I first started my application process and when I first left my home, my country, and my family. I'm happy that I can help inspire other students with backgrounds like mine to pursue their dream. I'm so grateful for all the help and guidance Education USA has given to me and the great opportunity to talk to other students from the different age groups and my same background about my experience. Education USA provides the most accurate information about the US higher education and empowers students from all over the world and from different backgrounds to pursue the goals of attaining a higher degree in the US. I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for their support and their constant help. Thank you so much, Education USA, and thank you all for inviting me to speak today.
Why don't you sit here? You inspire me.
Good morning, everyone. I want to first thank the U.S. Department of State, Assistant Secretary Royce, and the Education USA team in Brazil. I want to thank you for the invitation to speak here this morning. But most of all, I want to thank you for providing a sequence of opportunities that made it possible for me to be here today. I'm speaking as a first-year PhD student in political science at the University of Pennsylvania. My mother was a maid, and my father was a handyman. I'm the youngest of 4 brothers, and the only one in my family to ever attend university. My family always encouraged me to use the power of education to change my reality, growing up as a poor, black young man from a favela in Rio de Janeiro. 10 years ago, I was selected by the U.S. Embassy in Brazil as a youth ambassador, a program that brings outstanding Brazilian high school students from underprivileged backgrounds to the U.S. for a 3-week exchange program. When I returned from that program, I learned about Education USA and was soon after selected for the Opportunity Funds program to apply for undergraduate programs in the U.S. The extremely valuable lessons I learned during the application process helped me develop skills that opened doors to unique opportunities I could never have had access to. Though I didn't end up coming to the US as an undergraduate, I received a full scholarship to study economics at one of the best universities in Brazil. I graduated from college knowing that my objective in life was making it possible for others to learn about their own potential and accomplish goals to take them beyond the conditions in which they were born. To me, that meant pursuing a doctorate at one of the best institutions in the world in order to become an expert who will help Brazil build fair policies that touch on pressing challenges that we face today in areas like employment, housing, health, and of course, access to education. To gain more experience and perspective, I worked in the Brazilian government, at the Inter-American Development Bank, and at the World Bank, and I also became fluent in English. Again, I was selected for the Opportunity Funds program now to apply for a PhD. I was supported by a spectacular Education USA team who was willing to spend hours and hours reading the innumerable versions of my statements of purpose and my writing samples, teaching me about what the departments expected, giving me valuable insights to choose the schools which were the best fit for me, funding the costs of applying to these schools, and above all, making me believe this goal was certainly possible. To conclude, the Education USA support was what made all the potential I bring and the preparation I gathered actually catapult my presence at the University of Pennsylvania today. It was with this support that I will now be able to deepen my knowledge about Brazil and Latin America with access to resources only a top American school could offer. And in the future, return to Brazil and continue the changes I want to bring about in my country. I see the Opportunity Funds program as more than technical and financial support for students who would not be able to afford the application process to the US. The program makes it possible for young people to dream beyond what they see and reach further than where they were told they could go. The Education USA Opportunity Funds program is most of all a mechanism for social and economic development that guarantees that young people have access to the best higher education in America, regardless of the social conditions that were imposed on them at the beginning of their lives, making it possible not only for us, but also for our countries to turn extraordinary potential into solid and lasting reality. Thank you.
Again, thank you to Jocelyn Giovanni. Those were incredibly inspiring stories. And I also want to thank you to the counselors for Education USA for the countless hours put in to support these two incredible students. Let's give them one more round of applause. That was great. Thank you. It was wonderful. It was outstanding. Their stories are just a few examples of how international education can make an impact on students here and also abroad. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Alan Goodman of IIE, who will tell each of us more about the 2018 Open Doors Report. Alan, thank you.
So I want to thank again our students very much, and we're going to now turn to the statistical part of the program. We're going to do it in three segments. Rajika Bandari will start with the overall international student numbers coming to America. Rajika came to America from India in 1992 to do a PhD at North Carolina State University in psychology. So there is a future. And come back to IIE, please, after you return to Bolivia. Then Julie Baer will talk about Americans studying abroad. She was one of them. She was a Fulbright in 2012 to Malaysia on an English teaching fellowship and is now, of course, here in our research department. And Peggy was the conceiver and launcher of Project Atlas, which attempts to collect all of the data on a global basis so we know who's going where from each country and where they're headed next. So we'll do Rajika, Julie, and then Peggy, and then we'll open for questions. Rajika.
Thank you, Alan, and good morning to all. As Alan mentioned, I'm going to begin with an update on international student numbers from Open Doors. And as the Assistant Secretary mentioned, this is the third year in a row where we see over 1 million international students in the US, and that number now stands at 1.09 million, and this has represented an increase of 1.5% over the prior year. When we look at this over a 30-year timeline, this is what the trend looks like. But we're also seeing some significant variations by different types of students and by academic level. So in the remainder of my presentation, I'll sometimes be talking about total enrolled, all international students, and then sometimes be breaking it into students who are on optional practical training or OPT, which means they've completed their studies and they're on a period of post-study work. And enrolled students who are students at the undergraduate, graduate, and non-degree level. And when we look at this breakdown, we see that a lot of the growth that I mentioned earlier of 1.5% has really been at the OPT level, primarily because some years ago, the period of time that international students in the STEM fields could spend on OPT was significantly expanded to 3 years. So a number of students have been availing of that opportunity. When we look at enrolled students, we see that undergraduate students have remained about flat, or there's about a 1% increase. But we do see declines at the graduate level, as well as among students who are pursuing non-degree study. When we look at the enrollment of new international students, these are students who are new to their, who are at the US campus for the first time. Here too, we see some of that same pattern play out, where we have seen declines at all of the academic levels, and we saw a similar pattern last year too. Turning next to where international students study in the US and looking, where international students are coming from, the US does host international students from the entire world, from over 200 countries, in fact. And here we see the numbers for the top 3 places of origin, all of which are in Asia, China, India, and South Korea. And then here's what it looks like for the remaining countries that make up the top 25 places of origin. Now, these are total numbers. Once again, when we begin to break down this trend further, looking at active enrolled students versus those on OPT, we do see that amongst some of the major places of origin, there have been declines. But there have also been some increases. So, for example, we continue to see continued strong growth from Vietnam. A very nice turnaround this year was Brazil, where in prior years we'd seen those numbers decline because of the slowing down of the Brazil scientific mobility program. But then this last year we saw those numbers rebound, and then continued growth from Nepal, which has been sending quite a few students to the US. Turning next to where in the US international students study, they study, some of the major states remain the same, but it's also worth noting that overall international students make up just under 6% of all US higher education enrollment. Now, of course, at the graduate level, the presence of international students is much larger, but on average, it's under 6%. So clearly, there's a lot of room to grow, especially when we think about the fact that the US has over 4,000 institutions. So here are the numbers for the top host states: California, Texas, New York, and Massachusetts, each of whom is currently hosting 60,000 or more international students. But then again, we begin to see a slight variation when we look at the breakdown between enrolled students and OPT students. And over the past year or so, we have seen the flattening of numbers, and then this past year, a decline amongst institutions and states in the central portion of the country. And then if we round out this picture, there's some slight declines as well in the western part of the country. But then if you look at the entire eastern portion, it's all increases in enrollment, right from the top down to Florida. So that's, again, an interesting variation that's really pointing to a lot of the differences and variations in enrollment that we're seeing across different institutions and states. Looking next at what international students study, this has remained remarkably consistent over time, and most international students coming to the US are very interested in the STEM fields as well as business and management, and just over 20% of them are enrolled in engineering. And if we break this down further, we see that about 50% or half of all international students are in the STEM fields. And then here's how it breaks out for all of the other fields of study. But we also know that there are clear variations amongst the interest of international students from different countries and regions of the world. So if we begin with China, because most international students in the US are from China, and it sort of provides a baseline, here you can see that well over 40% are in the STEM fields, with about 21% in business and management. Here's what it looks like for a few other Asian countries. Now, it's worth drawing out India, because here you really see the difference between Chinese students and Indian students, and there's often a tendency to sort of lump them together, but in fact, the interests can often be quite different, with about 8 out of every 10 students in the US enrolled, Indian students in the US enrolled in the STEM fields. And these are some other places of origin. Now, as Assistant Secretary Roy said, international students contribute significantly to American classrooms, and this is particularly important when we consider the fact that only 1 out of every 10 US undergraduates will have the opportunity to study abroad. So what about the remaining 9? That makes the presence of international students in classrooms really, really critical. But we also know that they contribute in very tangible dollar terms to the US economy. And according to the estimates of the US Department of Commerce, in 2017, that contribution went up to over $42 billion. That's an increase of about $3 billion in what we'd seen in the prior year, which was a contribution of $39 billion. This contribution comes from the fact that almost 65% of international students are supporting themselves through a non-US form of funding, primarily their personal and family funds, but they also bring in other streams of funding to the US economy. And then the remainder is support that they receive from other sources, including their US college or university through teaching and research assistantships. Now, each year, in addition to Open Doors, which is comprehensive, it's retrospective, in that we're looking back over the prior year and gathering data from thousands of institutions over a 12-month period. Each fall, we also conduct a very quick snapshot survey, which we also sort of call a hot topic survey, because what we're trying to do in this survey is to get a quick look at what campuses are experiencing in the current fall semester. It's important to keep in mind that the scale and scope of this snapshot is very different from Open Doors. In Open Doors, we are serving thousands of institutions. It's the full comprehensive national level picture, whereas in the snapshot, we hear from about 500 institutions. I also want to mention that this is a joint effort amongst 10 higher ed associations, including IIE, and many of our 9 other partners are here in the room today, and I want to acknowledge and thank them for helping us with this effort. And as I mentioned, we distributed the survey this fall and received responses from about 500 institutions. And what we saw was actually very similar to last fall, where we found that overall total enrollment at institutions has remained more or less flat, but for the second year in a row, institutions did see a decline of a couple of percentage points in new enrollment. But a couple of things to note. One, that 49% of institutions reported a decline, but 51% of these 500 reported that they were either seeing increases or that their numbers were stable. Second, that this 2% decline is actually a lower rate of decline than what we saw last year, which was about 7%. It's very important to note that there are significant variations across institutions in what they're experiencing. And we heard this last year, and we are certainly seeing this also this year in the Snapshot survey. And that institutions continue to strongly support their international students through outreach, recruitment, and advocacy. And I think we heard some great examples just a few minutes ago of the experiences of the 2 students who spoke. We also ask institutions what they're trying to do to continue to encourage international students and where are they seeking international students. And not surprisingly, institutions continue to recruit very actively across Asia, including China and India, but also Vietnam. And we certainly see that in the numbers and the growth that I shared earlier from Vietnam. But at the same time, institutions are also concerned about student flows from particular parts of the world. Here again, while they're recruiting aggressively in Asia, they are concerned about student interest and demand from Asia, but also from Middle East and North Africa, as well as Latin America. We also ask institutions about what sorts of factors are not only enabling them to hold their numbers stable or increase them, but also what might be contributing to the slowdown or the decline. And what was really interesting to note was that 94% of those 500 institutions reported that it was really a range of factors. There isn't any one single factor that drives either the increases or the declines. And amongst what might be contributing to declines or sort of the perception of declines, because again, this is institutions reporting, it's not actual student numbers, there were concerns around visas, there are significant concerns around aggressive recruitment by other countries, and countries vying to attract international students, and then the very high cost of a US education. On the positive side of what's continuing to drive growth, the institutions have really stepped up their efforts to recruit students. They feel that there are a lot of investments being made in continuing to grow their reputation and visibility abroad, and then really working hard with students who've already been admitted and working with them to help them acclimate to a US higher education context. And finally, we also ask institutions about their efforts to help students adapt to their communities. And what we find is that institutions are not only working with prospective students, but students who are already there. They have worked extensively on social media campaigns over the past few years. We're all familiar with the hashtag #YouAreWelcomeHere and many other such efforts. So I want to conclude by very quickly acknowledging all of our partners within the higher education sector who really help us each year with both the Open Doors project as well as the Snapshot survey in really helping raise our response rates, because Open Doors wouldn't be what it is if we didn't have the very strong response rates that we enjoy. So this is everybody who's really helped us this past year. And with that, over to Julie and Study Abroad.
Thank you, Rajika, for the introduction. Today, I am pleased to be sharing information on U.S. students studying abroad. In the 2016-17 academic year, we noted continued growth in the number of U.S. students studying abroad for academic credit, up by 2% to nearly 333,000 students. Now, I do want to note that this information does lag 1 year behind the information Rajika just presented on international students. The reason for this time lag is due to the time that it takes for a student to return from their time abroad and then be awarded academic credit at their U.S. institution. Now, among these students going abroad, Europe remains the predominant destination, with over half of all U.S. students studying abroad in the region. Now, as we delve into destinations more fully, I want to start with highlights on growth to Europe. Here we have selected destinations, starting with the place that hosted the most U.S. students, the UK, and then proceeding down the list in descending order. Now, the top 3 destinations for study abroad, the UK, Italy, and Spain, all continued to see increasing numbers of U.S. students studying abroad. Germany and Ireland, which fall within the top 10 destinations, saw strong growth as well, up by 6% and 4% respectively. I also want to highlight Greece, which had a 22% growth this past year. Now, we had seen significant declines to Greece over a couple of years ago, but due to double-digit growth over the past 2 years, we have seen Greece reach an all-time high for U.S. students studying abroad. One area of decline that I want to highlight is the 4% decline in the number of U.S. students studying abroad to France, which is the 4th largest destination for study abroad. This decrease was likely due to concerns of student safety following terrorist incidences in 2016 and 2017. Outside of Europe, we saw strong growth in study abroad to both Asia and Oceania, with most of the leading destinations seeing increases in their numbers. I want to start by highlighting China, which is the #1 Asian destination for study abroad and ranks 6th worldwide. What is particularly notable about this 2% growth is that this is the first time in the past 5 years that we have noted growth in study abroad to China. Other leading destinations, including Australia, Japan, India, and South Korea, all saw strong growth as well. Interest has also been increasing in Southeast Asia. Here we have highlighted Thailand, which had 32% growth, but we also saw double-digit growth to other places such as Vietnam and Singapore. Growth in Africa was driven by a 4.5% increase in the number of students studying to the region. Growth in Africa was driven by an increase in study abroad to South Africa, which increased by 5%. Within the region, we also saw strong increases in Ghana and Tanzania in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Morocco and North Africa. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we saw a mixed picture. Mexico grew by a healthy 11%, as well as strong growth to Ecuador, Peru, and Chile. Of particular note, though, is the 22% growth in the number of U.S. students going to Cuba, which became the 15th leading destination. Due to recent policy changes, though, we may see growth to Cuba impacted in the future. We did, however, note decreases to both Costa Rica as well as Argentina. We will now turn to look more closely at the characteristics of U.S. students studying abroad, including their fields of study, the racial and ethnic profile, as well as gender, as women comprise 2/3 of study abroad students. The proportion of students in the STEM fields has increased up to 26% this year, and we have seen continued improvement in the numbers of students studying abroad from various racial and ethnic groups. But there does continue to be room for improvement across all areas, which we will delve into in the further slides. Over the past year, STEM majors have become the most predominant amongst U.S. students going abroad, with 26% of all study abroad students having declared a major in the STEM fields. Following STEM, business and management, as well as the social sciences, remain the most popular fields of study. Now, I do want to note that these are a student's field of study on their home campus and do not necessarily reflect their courses that they took while abroad. Not only has STEM been the most popular field of study, it also had the highest rate of growth this past year in 2016-17, up by 5%. The fastest specific majors include computer science as well as engineering. Now, while this may seem like an excellent picture overall, that we are sending a large and growing number of STEM students abroad, we do need to consider what this means for the overall U.S. higher education context. So in blue, we have the proportion of all U.S. students going abroad for each of these fields. And in gray, we have the overall undergraduate proportion of students studying in these fields. So you can see that while many of these fields remain well represented in study abroad, we do continue to see the STEM fields are underrepresented, specifically in the fields of health sciences as well as engineering. Another area where we have seen improvement over the past several years has been among the proportion of underrepresented racial and ethnic groups who have gone abroad. 10 years ago, just 18% of study abroad were from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups, and that has grown to 29% in 2016-17. While we have seen growth, when we compare this to the overall U.S. higher education population, over 40% of U.S. students identify as a racial or ethnic minority. So we still have work to do to make study abroad opportunities available and accessible to students from all backgrounds. An excellent example of this is an initiative that has provided opportunities for study abroad through merit scholarships is the U.S. Department of State's Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship Grant Program, which focuses on students with high financial need. What we have learned from Gilman is that the programs that target students with outreach and recruitment and provide funding opportunities can very effectively diversify the students who go abroad. As you can see here, about 68% of Gilman participants come from underrepresented backgrounds. Another way that study abroad is diversifying is through the types of activities that students are pursuing. In addition to 4-credit study abroad, In addition to 4-credit study abroad, institutions may offer non-credit study abroad opportunities, providing a wealth of unique experiences for students who may not be able to participate in 4-credit study abroad. For the past several years, Open Doors has collected information on non-credit experiential activities, such as work, internships, and volunteering abroad. Through that, we have documented that there are nearly 37,000 U.S. students who go abroad on experiential activities who did not receive credit at their home institutions for their time abroad. We know that this number is likely an undercount because only around 400 institutions were able to report this information. This year, for the first time, we were also able to collect information on the various types of activities that these students were studying. What we found is that among these students, volunteering and service learning opportunities are the most popular, with about 40% of the students studying in these fields. Water? Oh, yeah. For the first time this year, though, we also began to collect information on research and fieldwork, as well as other experiential activities. And what we have seen here is that around 45% of students reported going abroad on non-credit activities were pursuing these different activities. While Europe remains the most popular destination for U.S. students going abroad for 4-credit activities, Latin America is the most popular destination for non-credit experiential activities. So in this chart, we highlight the top destinations for students going abroad on non-credit activities, which include various countries in the Latin American Caribbean region, such as Nicaragua, Mexico, and the Dominican Republic. Now this year, since we did begin collecting information on students going abroad for research and fieldwork, as well as other activities, we have noted that both Canada and the UK now show up within the top region, or within the top destinations. Finally, in addition to the study abroad of US students enrolled in the United States, we see more and more Americans traveling abroad for 4-credit opportunities, or for full degree opportunities. So these are students who are not enrolled in US institutions, but they're students who are going abroad to gain an undergraduate or graduate degree. Through our Project Atlas work, we have been able to identify that around 48,000 US students pursue full degree opportunities abroad. The UK remains the predominant destination for full degrees abroad, but we also see a strong interest in students studying in other English language countries, such as Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, interestingly, there are other countries that are not English speaking, such as France, Germany, and China, that show up in this list. And this is due to the fact that many of these countries have also started offering full degree programs in English to attract international students worldwide, including US students. With that, I will now turn this over to Rajika to provide the global context. Oh my goodness, to Peggy Blumenthal.
We've all been working so long as a team that we're actually interchangeable, so thank you, Judy. So I'm going to talk about the Project Atlas. As Alan mentioned, about 15 years ago, we, in collaboration with international education partners around the world, notably the British Council and our Australian partners, decided we had to actually form a group of researchers and mobility experts to collect data on a common framework using the same definitions and release it at the same time on our website so you really could compare the US international mobility scene to other major host countries, other major sending countries. That project now has over 30 country partners and research affiliates. They're indicated here in orange. There's still a lot of gray on the map, and we would very much welcome other partners from other parts of the world, particularly there's Africa, Latin America, the Middle East. These are countries where we still are seeking a partner who kind of is the national collector of data and who can share with us on a timely basis their information. But what Project Atlas allows us to do is what Julie showed us, which was the number of Americans, for example, who are receiving full degrees abroad. There's no way that Open Doors can collect that because Open Doors surveys US colleges and universities, whereas Americans studying abroad for full degrees don't report back to us. But they do report to our country partners, and we're very grateful for their data as well. The major trends that we see that are affecting this general international mobility are the following. First of all, higher education enrollments are dramatically increasing, projected to be over 260 million students enrolled in higher education by 2025. And their mobility, in other words, studying outside their own country, that number has doubled since 2000. Students are looking globally because of various factors, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But some of the reason is just the demographic shift. There are some countries that are expanding their higher education population very quickly. For example, India and many countries in Africa, there are more and more students graduating secondary school who want to go to college and in insufficient home country capacity. In other countries, there's a declining youth cohort. For example, Japan, South Korea, Germany. And those countries are aggressively seeking to get more international students to fill the spaces that are now available in their colleges and universities. Technology will, of course, play a role in both directions. One, it will help students who are seeking education but can't either study abroad or get into their home institutions. Technology will provide ways for them to study online, and also technology is helping students get a taste for international education. For example, the American universities that offer courses online give them a sense of what it's like to study in the United States and maybe encourage them to actually apply directly, thanks to Education USA, for example, and your good comments. And finally, growing international and regional conflicts are displacing a lot of people who are no longer able to study in their home country and are therefore seeking to study abroad. How are countries responding to this kind of many different megatrends affecting in different ways? Well, our Atlas partners tell us that, first of all, schools in their own home countries are expanding capacity. They're also expanding opportunities for study abroad. They're seeking to train human capital, both their own, by sending them abroad, for example, through the Saudi and Brazilian scholarships, and also seeking to provide international scholarships to attract talent to their countries as well. They're actively recruiting global talent through recruitment, and they're looking more and more of how to ensure that the home country provides equity and access and diversity into the students who want to study both at home and abroad. Global engagement, more and more South-South partnerships, and more regional hubs, so that students who may have thought they want to study outside of their region now have opportunities to study within their region. And finally, university and consortia partnerships. We're seeing a lot of partnerships between a home university and a host university, so that it's not just student flows, but also faculty exchanges, research collaborations, and so on. Why do students want why do countries want international students? I think everybody in this room knows the range of factors. By internationalizing the home campus, as both our speakers here have said, you internationalize the experience for those who will never study abroad. The rankings help. There are not many times I say the rankings help, but the rankings do often ask, how international is your campus? How many international students and how many international faculty you have? And so schools that want to raise their profile in the international rankings are very interested in increasing international students. Building knowledge economies, every university it focuses on building knowledge, and knowledge is global, science is global, and therefore having international talent is very important. Educational and cultural exchange, as the Assistant Secretary said, is just a vital part of public diplomacy, not just for the United States, but for every country. And finally, but no means to be overlooked, revenue. Higher education is an export industry that brings millions of dollars into the economies of not just the United States, but many of the major host countries. Now the data that we get from our Atlas partners becomes really interesting because we look at the bar of when we first started collecting this data, there were about 2.1 million students in the internationally mobile, studying outside their home country. Now there are over 5 million internationally mobile students. Back in 2001, the leading host country was the United States, as it still is today. They talk about us losing market share, which in a sense is true in the actual percent of the global pie, but the global pie keeps expanding. So the numbers come to the United States have increased, even while our percentage of the total internationally mobile population has slightly dipped. The fact is there are new partners, there are new countries, there are new ways that people can study abroad, and you will see in the 2007 list, China now hosts over about 10% of internationally mobile students. Back in 2001, China wasn't even on that spectrum. It was in the other category. So things are changing. Many of the international hosts remain the same, but their percentage shares will shift as new partners come into the equation. I want to end by saying that the most aggressive targets have been set by many countries. They really want to see their numbers grow, and I was so delighted to hear Assistant Secretary Roy say that we too are committed, of course, to increasing our numbers, but other countries are as well. And you'll see the target set by Canada, Japan, Germany, and China. I just picked them because they've made very specific targets and are making progress toward those targets. China has actually fulfilled its targets and probably is going to have to increase its target again to have a new one for next year. But the decisions, whatever countries do, whatever universities do, the decisions are really driven by students. And students and their parents are looking for very specific things and deciding whether to study abroad. Certainly they're looking for high quality academic experiences. They're looking for chances for hands-on learning, internships, experiential learning. They're looking for affordability. A lot of the shifts you'll be seeing, and you are seeing, have to do with currency issues at home, rising and falling of the home currency. They're looking for postgraduate opportunities so that they can stay on and work in the host country for a while. And finally, they're looking for personal and professional growth, including close interaction with professors, cutting-edge science, research and innovation. And these are areas where, of course, the U.S. higher education system is unparalleled in terms of providing that kind of hands-on interaction with faculty, with industry, with researchers. And so Education USA has a very big role to play, but it actually is able to tell a very positive story to students, which makes them want to come here. These are our online resources. If you have any more questions, you can find them there or you can find them here. Thanks. I'll turn it over to Alan now.
And I really appreciate my colleagues this year giving the most comprehensive and global report that we've ever had. I'd like to ask Deputy Assistant Secretary Casagrant to join me up here. We'll start with a period of questions. I know we have to end promptly at 11, but what I'd like to do is go way over to the right-hand side, my right-hand side, then the left-hand side, and then in the middle. It's very hard to see because of the very bright lights, so if you have a question, could you stand, wave your hand? We have microphones that will reach you, and please identify who you are and where you're from. So on this side of the room, do we have anybody? Way in the back, yes. Just wait a minute till the microphone gets to you.
Oh, hi, my name is Marcelo Barros. I work with international students from a variety of different universities. I was curious if Open Doors collects data around OPT, utilization of OPT. I think we all know access to employment opportunities is a critical factor for international students. A huge area of dissatisfaction, I would say, if you speak with them and they really open their hearts and minds about that. So any data on schools reporting back to you on OPT, do you rank that and do you do that today, yes or no? Just thoughts on that.
Thank you. Rajika?
Sure. So we definitely collect data on participation in OPT, and that's the data that you saw up earlier broken out by academic levels. So we certainly have that data on how many students and from which institution, et cetera. What we do not gather is where students are actually spending their OPT, which may be in the same state where they studied, or it may be elsewhere. I'm sure you may have already seen it, but if you're interested in more in-depth analysis around this, I would guide you to Neil Ruiz's work at the Pew Research Center, where he's been delving into a lot of these more detailed issues around OPT.
Thank you. Now a question over, I see a hand waving. Yes, would you stand and the microphone will get to you.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Mindy Reiser. I worked for the Council for International Exchange of Scholars, CIES. I've also worked on USAID programs in many parts of the world. My question is this, and we've sort of talked around this, so I don't need to say there are people who have been making disparaging statements about certain parts of the world. We have certainly seen attacks on innocent people and, of course, the horrible gun violence. You haven't talked about this in any direct way. How is this influencing perceptions? And there are certainly contradictions within the US government itself in terms of welcome and support for the widest variety of ethnic and cultural groups. But there are internal contradictions in the US government. And how does this play out?
What we don't have is direct survey results from students, foreign students and their parents who are saying, here's what we're thinking about America or the UK or the other countries where we have a choice. We'll get that in the year ahead, but what I'm most struck with in the data that Julie and Rajik have been talking about, especially the fall snapshots, are that when we talk to universities, they'll say it's not one single factor, it's a mix of things. And I think I was on the phone yesterday with a colleague from the UK. She said exactly the same thing. As people talk about where they're going to go, it's not one element, it's half a dozen elements. And I think that's a new wrinkle in international education today. People are much more nuanced in choosing where they go, and they have real choices. Caroline, did you want to add anything?
Sure. I think we heard so much data this morning, and it was interesting, all the different data points. And as Dr. Goodman just explained, the recent fall snapshot that showed 94% of colleges said it was a mixed bag. And when we drilled down on those colleges, we found 51% were either holding or growing for the fall. So that tells us that there are some best practices out there, that some people are doing it very well, and I think everyone was inspired listening to Assistant Secretary Royce, as well as Secretary of State Pompeo, from the parts we could hear, commit the United States government's resources to increasing those numbers in the upcoming year. So I think one of the things that we should be on the lookout for in the upcoming year is the State Department to really be out there, to be showing best practices. We saw these trends beginning, quite frankly, in 2014, before there was really any change in a political environment in the United States. Those numbers started to go down. They have continued to trend as such. The Project Atlas slide that we've seen this morning, I think, was very instructive. It's very exciting that student population has more than doubled, but there are some incredibly new large players at the table when it comes to international education, which means that we cannot go along doing the same thing we were doing 10 years ago and expect the same results. So I think what you're going to see is a deep commitment on the part of the State Department to partner with our university partners, both public and private, to work towards the best practices that we know succeed, that we know 51% of our colleges and universities are looking at great numbers for next year. So we'd like to replicate that success throughout the United States so we can continue to grow.
Thank you. Now I promised a question in the middle. I see two hands waving, one in the back, and then I'll come to the front. The back, please.
Hi, my name is Anna Wise from Towson University, right outside Baltimore. I have a question about secondary international students studying in the U.S. I know Open Doors has in the past done some snapshot analyses looking at secondary populations, but if I'm not missing something, that hasn't been always done on an annual basis. Now, I know that population is growing and something that we international enrollment management people are very interested in. So I wonder if you could speak to that, please.
And I think all of us are appreciating how important looking at the secondary school dynamics is important for Americans and also for our international students. But Rajika?
Yes, so we've done that analysis a few times, and you're absolutely right. We haven't carried it out this past year, but it is, as both you've said and Alan has said, that it's a very important demographic. From the time that we last conducted that research, we know anecdotally that those numbers continue to rise. So thank you for asking about that. That's a reminder that we need to go back and do another update on that, because clearly it's a student population that's of great interest.
Maybe I can just add that in the fall snapshot survey that was just released, I think about a quarter of the U.S. responding universities said they are recruiting international students in the United States. So this is a very kind of important new segment. You don't necessarily need to send your recruitment officers around the world. You can also send them to the states nearby where their students are studying at the secondary level.
And I think we did a white paper on this middle of last year. Do we have one scheduled for 2019?
Certainly do it. No?
I guess we just have one scheduled now. Thank you. Thank you. A question.
I just wanted to quickly add the State Department continues to fund several high school exchange programs, including programs through our Education USA centers, and as well as our FLEX programs, some of the other programs that are run through Educational and Cultural Affairs, and we consider those programs as some of our best pipelines of students with the English skills and academic skills needed to succeed in the United States, and we will continue to be committed to those programs.
Thank you. Yes, please. A microphone is coming to you now.
Hi, my name is Sarah Dumont. I'm Executive Director of Study Abroad at American University here in D.C.
Great.
I'm sorry, Rajika, I'm going to ask a question I've asked before because I am really quite perturbed to see that The data that Open Doors reports on race and ethnicity is in a table that's really very misleading, because you report the percentages and then you show the total number of students abroad, but you don't report the category of unknown or do not report. This is a category that certainly at my institution has been growing every year. So the percentages that you're reporting, unless you've put the unknowns in some category, in which case I think we need to know which category you've put them in, those percentages are not percentages of the total number of students abroad. They're only the percentages of those who have reported. So why don't you give that number instead of making it seem as if those percentages of ethnicity and race that you're reporting are percentages of the whole, because they're not.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, you're right, Sarah. I think and we can certainly sort of look into that again, and we do make adjustments every few years in both in how we gather the data and report it. So thank you for that, and we can certainly take that back and look at it. I'll just say that an increasing challenge for us, and I'm sure for you, because you're on the front lines of it, is that we are finding that we are getting less and less high-quality, detailed data from institutions on the race and ethnicity of their study abroad students, because students can choose to not report that information. It's completely voluntary, as I understand it. So I think there's just an overall issue in US higher education that affects the entire sector and certainly affects Open Doors around how much of the race and ethnicity are we capturing accurately, because really it depends on what students are choosing to report. But certainly we'll take your suggestion back and
Mm-hmm. Because the fact that the non-reporting keeps going up, I think, is a key issue that all of us are confronting. I can't use your data to benchmark what I'm doing, because the percentages that you're reporting don't relate to the percentages. I report back to my institution the unknowns. And I have the percentages that was reported within our city's growth population. You can see that. I can't compare it to you.
We understand your point. We'll do our best. Thank you. Questions on this side? All right, we have 3 questions here. We'll go with the most vigorous hand wave first. If you would stand up, please.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Becca Berman from American Council for International Education. I work with the NIST Wide Youth Program, so I was happy to hear what you said. We definitely have a lot of alumni who continue on through the higher education program, which is always exciting to see. One thing I wanted to ask about is I was disappointed that there wasn't anything about students with disabilities. I know, like somebody mentioned, we do have a lot of issues with students not disclosing or wanting to disclose on this report, but were there any findings or considerations of how students with disabilities are participating as international students or in study abroad programs? Thank you.
I know we work closely with Mobility International, and we have been doing some work on this, but maybe Julie first and then Rajika.
Certainly. Well, we don't have any information on international students with disabilities. We have been collecting this information on U.S. students studying abroad. In the most recent data collection, we did have around 9% of the students going abroad identifying as having some sort of disability. And thanks to our work with Mobility International, we do have specific classifications of disabilities as well. So we have been collecting statistics on learning disabilities, physical disabilities, sensory, etc. And we do have the full chart of statistics available on our website.
Any comment? So just to say on behalf of Fulbright, it's a privilege when I get to travel. I know Assistant Secretary Royce and Deputy Assistant Secretary Casagrande also travel and see Fulbrights. In the past year, every visit I've made to a Fulbright group or a Fulbright conference has been inclusive. And students with physical challenges have been front and center. And I'm really amazed and impressed at the accommodations that the Fulbright Commissions abroad especially have made to make sure that Americans coming to their country represent the full range of our citizens and are having a meaningful academic experience. So thank you for your question. Now, the next most visible hand wave is at the same table.
Hi, good morning. Rachel Dinkus from the American Institutes for Research. Good morning, Rashka. I always love your report. The question's not for you this year. I'm going to ask the Assistant Deputy Secretary from the State Department. As someone who loves data, I would love to have the State Department invest more resources in collection of the gender distribution of students coming from these countries. And also, if possible, I know we're working with small groups, to know what fields these students are going into by gender from country. I think that's very important to know, and it would be lovely to collect these data. So if that would be possible to collect, I would love to use them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful suggestion. We fund the Open Doors report in no small part because it's so important for us to understand the data and the trends and international study, and I think it's an excellent point that we make sure we're drilling down on that gender distribution. I thought it was very exciting in our outgoing American report of the gender data that 2/3 of our study abroad students are women now. But we certainly could do a better job drilling down on some of that other data, and we will make that suggestion. Thank you.
Any comment, Rajika or Julie?
Yeah, no, I actually completely agree with what Rachel is raising because just to remind everyone, we do capture gender in Open Doors. It's a very, very important variable, and we do report out those trends each year. But yes, they are for international students as a whole, and we don't break it down by country or world region. And that is a very interesting question to look at because we do know anecdotally that there's a great deal of variability on where women are coming from and as well as what they might be studying. So thank you for that.
Other questions here? Yes. If you would stand up, please, and then I'll go to one more question here, and we'll pretty much be drawing to the close. Yes.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Shauna Saubert from NAFSA, the Association of International Educators, and I want to thank you for the presentations and all the data and the comments you've made. I had one question about U.S. students studying abroad for full degrees. I noticed that the data was from 2014, and I was wondering if that is because other countries have a lag in data time, but I also wondered how many U.S. students are going abroad for full degrees and then coming back into the country and directly utilizing their international experiences in the current workplace. Thank you.
So I'll start, and then my colleagues will correct me because I'll probably say it wrong. But to answer the last thing first, we don't have information about what students do after they come back with their full degree because we only get the data about full degree study from our host country partners, and they don't know what happens afterwards. But it's a great question. It's one of those things that you almost have to survey students somehow online, and I haven't figured out how to do that yet. In terms of the data on Americans going for full degrees abroad, actually most of the data is more current than 2014. The little asterisk was linked to China, and we're still working with our colleagues from China to get more updated data, but I believe every other country is like 2017 data. It varies. You know, each country collects a little bit differently. Some of them break it down by academic level. Some of them didn't. So I'll give you that slide again to look at more closely. But it's complicated, and it really depends on our data partners. So thanks to our Atlas partners, we've got to keep doing better.
Any more questions here? Yes. If you would stand, please.
Good morning. My name is Morena Montgomery, and I work at the Ralph Bunche International Affairs Center at Howard University over our outbound student study abroad. I have a small question and then a larger question, and the smaller question is there information by region that shows the number of students, underrepresented students currently, that are studying abroad, and perhaps the institution type that is responsible for supporting those increases, or again, just
U.S.
regionally?
region or
U.S. domestic,
okay.
right.
All right.
I work at an HBCU, and I'd like to say that part of the reason the number of African Americans is increasing is because of the work that we do, but I know it can't just be us. So I'm interested in knowing, yeah, by region, and then perhaps being able to look at the motivation that students may have for going abroad. And then also the larger question I would like to pose is, what are the, or do we know information about some of our current administration's goals in terms of student mobility, and I know under Obama there was the 100,000 Strong in the Americas initiative, and do we know of anything that our current administration is working on right now? Thank you.
All right. Julie, and then Caroline, if you want to wrap up, that would be great.
Great. So when we do look at study abroad, we have conducted several series of special analyses in recent years. So most notably in last year's Open Doors publication, we did take a look at study abroad by different institutional types, particularly minority serving institutions. And that's an analysis we've done for a couple of years now and continue to look at. So we do have breakouts on information by the racial and ethnic profile as well as gender by these different institutional types.
Caroline.
Oh, sure. Well, I think we heard Assistant Secretary Royce give the administration's commitment at the beginning of this presentation today to the resources we need to improve student mobility into the United States. She talked about the 550 advisors in the 430 Education USA centers. She is the leader of Educational and Cultural Affairs and will be making sure that ECA is putting the resources and time and thoughtful effort into making sure those educational advising centers are running as strongly and as smoothly as well. She certainly has also been a very vocal advocate for American higher education. She has been all over the world since she took her office, explaining the wonders of the diversity and the strength and the capacity of American higher education. So she has been a vocal proponent as well as a proponent from a leadership perspective of the resources that Educational and Cultural Affairs within the Department of State is spending. And we also heard from Secretary of State Pompeo at the beginning of this presentation committing the Trump administration to a commitment to increasing international student mobility numbers.
And want to thank all of you for your work. Every day, I know, for all of you is International Education Day, and we couldn't be successful as a country or in our organizations without your help. Thank you, and have a great morning and a great week.